Growing up in our modest two-story house, I realized early on that my sister Rita was different from the others. As my parents said, she was special. I was 6 years old when she was born, and from the very beginning, everything in our house revolved around her fragile health. "Sarah, close the window right now," Mom was shouting from downstairs. "Your sister might catch a cold." It was the soundtrack of my childhood, a constant reminder that Rita's well-being is everyone's main concern. I remember the day when I first realized how different our roles would be. I was 12, and Rita had just started elementary school. One day she came home with a runny nose. It's nothing serious, but from the reaction of my parents, you'd think she had pneumonia. "It's your fault, Sarah," my father said, and his words pierced me like a knife. "You probably kept the door open too long when you left for school." I wanted to protest that Rita had most likely been infected by her classmates, but I knew better than to say anything. I just nodded and accepted the punishment, house arrest for the weekend. In the same year, my mother began delegating household chores to me. While my peers were playing after school, I was learning how to properly dust, vacuum carpets, and do laundry. "But, Mom, why doesn't Rita help?" I asked one day, folding a mountain of laundry, and my sister was sprawled on the couch, staring at the TV screen. Mom didn't even look at me. "Your sister has a weak immune system, Sarah. The doctors say she shouldn't overexert herself." That's how it became the law. If something needed to be done, I did it. If something went wrong, it was my fault. When Rita got a B in math, my father punished me for a week. I had to help her study. When she broke my mom's favorite coffee mug, it was my fault again. Should have watched her more closely. I remember a particularly unpleasant incident when I was 16 and Rita was 10. She took my favorite sweater without asking and spilled juice on it. I complained to my mom, hoping at least for sympathy, but she just sighed wearily. "Sarah, you should have put it where she couldn't reach it. You know how careless she is." Maybe that was the moment when I first seriously started dreaming about college, about running away. I plunged into my studies, realizing that education was my only chance for freedom. Every time I felt overwhelmed by the injustice at home, I channeled that energy into my studies. The teachers noticed my dedication and praised me. But even my successes at home turned into a way to justify Rita's weaknesses. "Look how easy it is for Sarah," Mom told her sister. "You just have to try harder, honey." But Rita didn't have to try. There were always excuses. I was there to pull her along. When graduation day came, I had already accepted that college was not for me. We didn't have any money, but I understood that all the savings would go to Rita's education. I've already looked through the job listings, planning to work at a diner while taking classes at a community college. That evening, after all the graduation ceremonies were over, Mom and Dad invited me into the living room. Rita, as usual, was sprawled on the couch, buried in her phone, her fingers lazily sliding across the screen. "Sarah, sit down," her father said. His voice was unusually serious. "We need to talk about your future." My stomach clenched. That's it. A lecture about the duty to the family, about the need to postpone their dreams for the common good. I was ready for this conversation, ready for my desires to be on the back burner again. But Mom suddenly reached into her purse and took out an envelope. "We've been saving up," she said, putting it on the coffee table and gently pushing it in my direction. "Since you were little." I slowly reached for the envelope, feeling my hands tremble. Inside was a bank statement. An account was opened in my name with enough money to pay for 4 years of public college tuition. But, I stammered, looking from the paper to my parents. "We can see how well you're doing," Mom explained, glancing briefly at Rita, who pretended not to listen. "And Rita, college may not be in her future. We thought it would be better to spend this money on you." I was speechless. For the first time in my life, I got something that Rita didn't get. It seems strange, almost wrong. All these years, priorities have been set differently. But my father didn't give me much time to think. "We need you to promise us something." His voice hardened and his gaze became piercing. He leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "When you graduate from college and find a good job, you will help your family. Don't forget about your sister." "Of course," I replied hastily, still stunned. "I promise." Rita suddenly jumped up and ran out of the room, slamming the door. Mom sighed, but to my surprise, she didn't rush after her, as she always did. This moment is clearly etched in my memory, because it was in stark contrast to the years of their constant care for Rita, with her habit of being the center of attention, demanding care and attention. That fall, I packed up and went to public college, 3 states away from home. The distance seemed like freedom. For the first time in my life, I could open the windows without being afraid that someone would catch a cold. I could study without being distracted by household chores, without looking after Rita, without feeling the constant burden of responsibility for other people's actions. 4 years passed quickly. 2 months before graduation, I was offered an offer that I couldn't refuse. A prestigious firm offered me a position with an excellent salary and growth prospects. This was the chance I had dreamed of since childhood, the very ticket to independence that I cherished in my heart. When I called my parents with this news, their reaction surprised me. "We understand, honey," her father said softly. "Do what you think is necessary." No reproaches, no hints of duty to the family. I found a nice apartment near the office, settled into my new life. I called my parents every weekend. But our conversations, as always, revolved around Rita. "She's still looking for herself," Mom said. After graduating from high school, Rita never went to college or got a job. She just existed. But for the first time in my life, I didn't feel obligated to fix it. 3 years have passed. I was building a career, moving forward. And then one day, sitting in the office, looking through the quarterly reports, I saw a familiar name light up on my phone screen. "Sarah, dear," Mom's voice was as sweet as honey. I immediately understood what that meant. "You know, it's so hard for Rita to find a job," she began. I closed my eyes, already knowing where this would lead. "Maybe you could put in a good word for her. Should I get her to join my company? She's very smart, you know." I froze, clutching my phone. How do you explain to your mom that Rita, who hasn't worked a day in her life, won't even pass the first stage of an interview? "Well," I said carefully, trying to keep my voice soft and even, "we have several vacancies. Let me send the application form so Rita can see what the requirements are." That evening, I sent the standard questionnaire to my sister's email. The requirements stated: crystal clear bachelor's degree, proficiency in SAP and Oracle systems, fluency in 2 foreign languages besides English, at least 5 years of relevant work experience, preferably in large companies. After that, Mom stopped asking about how to get Rita into my company. Life went on. I worked hard, got promoted twice, and started saving money into a savings account. The idea of buying your own home has taken shape. You will no longer need to rent an apartment. You will be able to call the space truly your own. 2 years later, for the first time in several months, I decided to go home. When I got out of the car and looked at the house, it seemed smaller to me than in my memories. The paint was peeling, the fence was askew, and there were signs of neglect in some places. Inside, everything was painfully familiar. Rita was still sprawled out on the couch, looking at her phone, just like when we were teenagers. Over dinner, I shared my plans. "I'm saving money," I said, shifting the peas around my plate. "I'm thinking about buying an apartment. The market is good now, and with my credit score, I could get a decent mortgage rate." There was silence in the room. Mom and Dad exchanged glances. Rita suddenly showed an increased interest in her mashed potatoes. I felt the tension, but I didn't focus on it, deciding that I might have just imagined it. A week later, the call came. "Sarah, honey, we need to talk." Mom's voice was different. There was anxiety in it, almost despair. I pressed the phone to my ear and froze. "Your father is not feeling well," she continued. "His back hurts again, and he can no longer take extra shifts at work." She began to list the problems: a leaking roof, outdated plumbing, walls that urgently needed to be painted. Each problem was accompanied by a price tag. "We're barely making it," Mom said in a cracked voice. "And after all we've done for you, honey, the college money has given you a chance at a good life. Now it's time for you to help your family. Sarah, we need you." It was a reminder of my duty to them. A promise I made many years ago. The dream of owning an apartment faded with every word my mother uttered. After that phone call, I spent several sleepless nights thinking about the situation. The guilt was eating me up. I was planning to buy an apartment here, while my parents couldn't even fix the leaky roof. Finally, I made a decision that will change everything. On Sunday morning, I called my mom back. "I've been thinking about what you said," I began, trying to keep my voice level. "I want to help. I'm going to give you access to my account. You can spend up to $2,000 a month. This should cover the repairs and help with the bills." The silence on the other end lasted so long that I thought the connection had been cut. But then Mom's voice returned, filled with emotion. "Sarah, it's so generous. That's a huge amount. We probably won't even need that much. Just for basic repairs and a few groceries." I explained to her how to set up account access via phone. "Just keep in mind the limit," I reminded him. $2,000 a month. Of course, my mother assured me. "We will be very careful with this." The first few months went smoothly. I was busy at work and barely checked my account activity. But when I finally looked at the bank statements, I saw only modest expenses: $700 here, $800 there, mostly hardware stores, grocery purchases, utility bills. It seemed that the parents were really responsible about money, as promised by Mom. But then everything started to change. The amounts began to grow gradually: $900 one month, $1,100 the next. I tried not to worry. After all, they were still within the limit, and house repairs could be more expensive than planned. And then a notification came that changed everything. I was in a meeting when my phone vibrated in my pocket. Out of the corner of my eye, I noticed a notification pop up and automatically glanced at the screen. "Attention, 2 large transactions at Luxe Boutique." I froze. Not happening. As soon as the meeting ended, I opened the banking app. It read in black and white, a $2,000 purchase at one of the most expensive clothing stores in their area. I stared at the screen in disbelief. I've never allowed myself to shop in places like this. In order to save up for an apartment, I couldn't justify spending so much on clothes. My hands were shaking slightly as I dialed my mom's number. "Mom," I said, trying to keep my voice level. "I just received a notification about a $2,000 purchase at the Luxe Boutique." "What's happening?" There was a pause on the other end of the line, followed by nervous laughter. "Oh, well, it's my birthday next month." Her voice was unnaturally light. I saw this absolutely gorgeous dress and thought, well, I'd been so depressed lately because of all our problems. I just wanted to pamper myself a little bit. I pressed my lips together. "Okay," I said, wanting to avoid an argument. "Just please stick to the limit we agreed on." "Of course, dear," she replied hurriedly, and then added, "By the way, I'm still looking forward to your birthday present. You haven't forgotten, have you?" I hung up the phone and stared at the screen for a long time. Something was wrong. It wasn't just the dress. I felt that there was something more that I hadn't noticed yet. From that moment on, I started checking my account regularly. I set up alerts on my phone that informed me about each transaction in detail. And what I saw made me go cold. Expenses were rising at an alarming rate. Mom exceeded the limit of $2,000, as if it had never existed. One month is $2,000, the next is another $2,000. Then I realized that in some months the amount reached up to $4,000. My savings account, which I had nurtured so carefully for years, dreaming of owning my own home, was shrinking instead of growing. One evening, when I saw another large transaction, I opened my laptop and created a spreadsheet. The numbers were right in front of me. They spent more in just a few months than I did in a whole year. I looked at my own expenses. My expenses were modest: rent, utility bills, groceries, rare dinners with colleagues. I drove a used car, bought clothes only at sales, and brought lunch from home almost every day. Meanwhile, my parents were allegedly spending thousands on what? I haven't seen any evidence of repairs. A thought flashed through my head: I need to see everything with my own eyes. I picked up the phone and dialed my mom's number. "Mom," I said with a deliberately warm intonation. "I think I'll come home next weekend." "Oh," she replied, with sudden tension in her voice. "This is unexpected." "Well, I'd like to celebrate your birthday in person," I continued. "And I'd also like to see the dress you bought." Silence. "Of course, dear," she finally said. "We will be glad to see you. Besides," I added, pretending to be casual, "you can show me all the improvements you've made to the house. I'd like to see the renovation." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Then Mom laughed, but it sounded fake. "Sure, honey," she said. "Of course. We'll show you everything." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. When Mom finally spoke, there was a harshness in her voice that I had never heard before. "Oh, no, dear, don't come," she said too quickly. I'm not really going to celebrate my birthday this year. I don't feel fit." "But, Mom," I frowned. "I haven't been home for several months, and I would really like to." "No." She cut me off abruptly, and then, as if catching herself, softened her tone. "It's just not the right time, Sarah. But you can mail my gift if you want." That call triggered all the alarms in my head. I spent the whole night going through 6 months of bank statements, line by line. The more I looked, the less sense it made. Spending in stores that I've never heard of. Restaurants open until 2 in the morning. Bars, expensive clubs. No significant expenses for home repairs, just small purchases: $100 at Home Depot, $200 at a plumbing store. These were paltry amounts compared to what I saw next. Jewelry salons. Designer clothing boutiques. Beauty salons. Cosmetic procedures. Someone bought a smartphone for $1,200 last month. My mom, who was still using an old flip phone, claiming she didn't need anything fancy. The picture began to take shape, the details coming into focus. Nightclubs. Expensive clothes. Beauty salons. It wasn't my parents' expenses that were barely making ends meet. It was someone else's expense. Someone young. Someone who loved parties. Someone with expensive taste and no job. Rita. The realization hit me like a physical blow. All this talk about a leaking roof, broken plumbing. All the attempts to make me feel guilty for not helping my family. It was a smokescreen. My supposedly distressed parents didn't use my money to renovate the house. They funded my sister's lavish lifestyle. I felt sick. I continued flipping through the transactions, and with each new entry, my stomach twisted more. A day at the spa for $300. Shopping for $500 in a designer boutique. Bar bills for $200. Several times a week. That's why Mom didn't want me to come. There were no major repairs, no improvements. Rita just lived on my money while I was saving every penny, saving for my dream. I spent the next morning pacing around the apartment with my phone in my hand, rehearsing what I would say. Finally, around noon, I dialed my mom's number. "Mom," I said firmly as soon as she answered. "We need to talk about where my money really goes." Another pause. "What do you mean, darling?" There was a note of caution in Mom's voice. "I think you know exactly what I mean," I said, taking a deep breath. "Bars. Designer clothes. A new smartphone. It's not your expense. They are Rita." I heard her inhale sharply. And then a long, heavy exhale. When Mom spoke again, her voice had changed. There was no sweet tone anymore. There was no pretense. "Well, what did you expect?" There was obvious defensiveness in her voice. "We're a family. Rita needs good things too." I felt a wave of rage wash over me. Good things? My patience started to crack. She spends $4,000 a month on entertainment while you pretend to barely survive. "There's nothing she can do about it if she hasn't found her way yet," Mom retorted. "Mom, you lied to me. You said the money is going to renovate the house." "We really spent some of the money on repairs," she interrupted me irritably. "But, Sarah, you have so much, and Rita has so little." I gritted my teeth. "Do I have a lot?" I repeated, not believing my ears. "I work day and night to provide for myself. Besides," Mom suddenly lowered her voice, and her next sentence made my insides turn cold. "You owe us." I froze. "What? Have you forgotten who paid for your fancy higher education?" Her voice turned cold, accusing. I felt a shudder run through my body. "Mom," my voice sounded hoarse. "You said that you have been saving this money for me since childhood. We saved up for the family." There was something icy in her words that brooked no argument. "And now it's your turn to pay." I almost laughed. I was expecting this, a last attempt to put pressure on my guilt, to remind me of my duty to my family. But this time I was ready. "Mom," I said evenly, "last night I calculated all the expenses for the last 2 years. Do you want to know what I found?" I opened the spreadsheet on my laptop screen and scrolled down the list. "You spent $72,000 of my money." The line went silent. "That's more than you and Dad paid for my college tuition, even with interest." I paused to let her process what I'd said. "So, no. I don't owe you anything anymore." There was a short, strained breathing on the other end of the line. And then, a click. Mom hung up the phone. I slowly put the phone down on the table and closed my eyes. Anger boiled inside me. Almost on autopilot, I opened Facebook and typed Rita's name into the search. I haven't looked at her profile in months. I was too busy working, focused on my own life. But now I scrolled through post after post, and with every swipe of my finger on the screen, my anger only grew. Here she is, posing in a $2,000 luxe boutique dress, the one my mom called a birthday present. Here she is at the resort, relaxing by the pool, with a cocktail glass in her hand. Photo after photo, parties, clubs, restaurants. I knew these places. I found out the amounts in the bank statements. In one of the photos, she posed in jewelry, which I unknowingly paid for. She marked herself in all these prestigious places, with my money. I needed more information. I picked up the phone and called Aunt Marie, the only person in the family who had never believed in the fairy tale of Saint Rita. "Aunt Marie," I said when she answered, "I need to ask you something." "Sure, honey, what's wrong? Have you been to my parents' house lately? Did they really do any repairs?" A bitter laugh sounded on the phone. "Repairs? What is it?" she asked sarcastically. "The only thing that has changed is that the house is getting worse." I gritted my teeth. Dad doesn't even want to fix the broken porch step. My fingers tightened on the phone. "Why do you ask?" I took a deep breath. "Because I sent them money. For repairs. And a lot of money." With each new detail, Aunt Marie's voice became tougher. "Oh, Sarah," she finally said, and there was genuine regret in her voice. "Not a single cent of this money went to the house." My stomach clenched into a knot. "Rita doesn't work. He's not even looking for a job. All she does is go to nightclubs." I felt sick to my stomach. "And you know what else?" Aunt Marie continued. "She's trying to get my Jenny into this." I tensed up. "What?" "She invites her to parties all the time. He tells me how cool it is to live freely and carefree." My anger turned to icy fear. I opened my mouth, but I didn't have time to say anything. "And that's not all, Sarah." Aunt Marie's voice became quieter, almost conspiratorial. "There's something you should know." I held my breath. "Jenny told me in confidence, but I think you should hear it." "What?" "Rita is showing everyone a letter of recommendation, supposedly from you." I froze. "What?" "She says she got a job in your company. Under your guidance." My blood froze. "Jenny saw him. It has your signature and the official seal on it." My mind was racing. "She wants to use it to apply to Carlton Industries." The room spun around me. A fake letter of recommendation. With my signature. If she gets caught, and she gets caught, it won't just be her reputation at stake. This will be my career. Everything I've been working on for years can be destroyed. I hung up with Aunt Marie and immediately dialed the HR department. My hands were shaking as I explained the situation. "I need to report a fraudulent letter of recommendation," I said, feeling my heart racing. "My sister is applying to Carlton Industries with a fake letter on my behalf. I didn't write it. I didn't sign it. She's never worked for my company." The voice on the other end of the line was calm but stern. "Are you sure?" "Absolutely." "Then we need to meet in person. We will discuss what measures can be taken." I closed my eyes. Good. I opened my fingers and the phone fell out of my hands onto the table. There was a deep silence in the room. I thought it was the end of everything. I was wrong. 2 days later, my phone exploded with calls. When I finally answered, my mom's screaming voice message almost tore my eardrums. "How dare you sabotage your sister's career?" "Stop it," she screamed. "She was going to get the job." "Mom," I began, trying to speak calmly. "She forged my signature. This is a scam." She was finally trying to achieve something. Mom continued as if she hadn't heard a word of what I said. "And you've ruined everything." There was a noise on the phone, and then my father's voice rang out, louder and angrier than ever before. "Rita cried for 2 days in a row because of you." "Stop it," he growled. "Is that what you wanted? Hurt your sister? Well, congratulations. You're not my daughter." I was stunned. "Dad. Consider yourself forsaken." I felt a lump in my throat, but before I could answer, he added the last, scariest thing. "If you ever want us to forgive you." His voice turned cold and calculating. "You'll have to send us more money." much more than before. Maybe then, someday, we can think about forgiveness. That was the last straw. Years of manipulation, guilt, and injustice hit me like an avalanche. And suddenly everything became crystal clear. No. I said it calmly, without anger. I was just stating a fact. I don't owe you anything anymore. I selflessly helped you, and you lied to me. If you really need money, why don't you ask Rita? I paused. After all, it was on her that you spent them. Before they could respond, I hung up the phone. My hands were shaking when I opened the banking app. I have permanently revoked my mother's access to my account. When I pressed the confirmation button, the weight lifted from my shoulders. But a new weight settled in my stomach. I knew there would be a call. And it started the next morning. Voice message. How could you do this to us? Mom screamed shrilly. After all we've done for you. You're selfish, __. A message from Rita. Do you think you're the best with your gorgeous job and perfect life? I deleted the messages without listening to the end. But they kept coming, day after day. Text messages. Voice messages. Emails. All of them were full of insults, accusations, demands to restore access to money. Each new message was angrier and more desperate than the previous one. I blocked their numbers, but they started calling from other phones. I blocked them too. A week after the start of this shelling, Aunt Marie called me. Sarah, dear, her voice was soft, understanding. I wanted to warn you. About what? She sighed. Your parents are calling everyone in the family. They tell me what a terrible daughter you are. How you abandoned them in a difficult moment. I clenched my jaw. I know the truth, and so does Jenny. Aunt Marie paused. We tried to tell them they were wrong. But they don't listen. She spoke sympathetically, but I could feel the weight of her words. I just wanted you to know what they're doing. That was 3 months ago. Now my life has entered a new normal. My savings account is growing again. It's amazing how quickly money accumulates when others aren't spending it. I started to seriously look at apartments. I went to screenings on weekends. I even met with a mortgage consultant last week. The calls stopped. Almost. Sometimes I still get random messages from new numbers. But I delete them without reading them. Now, sometimes, I think about my parents. Is Dad's back really getting worse? If Mom is still covering for Rita? I wonder, is Rita trying to forge signatures now? Or is she still living a luxurious life at someone else's expense? But mostly I'm focused on my life. I am working. I'm saving up. I spend time with friends who appreciate me for who I am, not for what I can give them. I'm learning to stop feeling guilty for taking care of myself in the first place. Will I ever talk to my family again? To be honest, I do not know. Maybe someday everything will change. Maybe they'll realize what they did wrong. Or I will find it in my heart to forgive them. Even if they don't. But now, I'm focused on building the life I want. A life that is not burdened by feelings of guilt or expectations of other people. Write a comment on what you think about this story and don't forget to subscribe to the channel and like it. See you soon.